Hello everybody. We're starting today with brand new orange My Odyssey shirts. Pretty stoked about that. I have other colors too, but I thought orange was particularly good for the video because you can't miss my pumpkin ass. All right, bunch of topics today. One of them actually I'm taking from a book, 15 Commitments to Leadership, to Conscious Leadership, excuse me. It's kind of a throwaway analogy that they use. It feels like to fill some space. However, I think it's fantastic. I used it or tried to use it in a podcast the other day or in a Facebook Live or something of that nature, and I totally messed it up. So I wanted to put it on video here now for the people that were either listening to that or so I have it for future reference. Okay, so this is an umpire analogy. Three umpires are having a conversation. Okay, the first umpire says, there's balls and strikes, they are what they are. The second umpire says, there's balls and strikes, and I call them how I see them. The third umpire says, there's just pitches. Then there's just pitches until I assign a label to them. So what I'd like to do is do a little survey here if you're watching this video. Which umpire do you associate with? Okay, umpire one, I just call the balls and strikes as they are. They happen. I call them. Umpire two, they're balls and strikes and I call them as I see them. Or umpire three, they're just pitches until I assign ball or strike to them. I'm really curious as to see how this turns out. All right, so because I record all these videos at once, I'm going to continue on with how kind of an explanation of them. So it turns out that if you were with umpire one, normally you have a little bit more of a stressful life. And the reason being is you perceive things as they are what they are, things are happening to you, and you just kind of move along in your reality. Okay, umpire two still feels that way, that things happen to you. However, if you associate it with umpire two, normally you're going to be like, well, I understand that I still have somewhat of a choice and my choice matters in the situation. Umpire three is normally the least amount of stress because they're taking the event in as it happens, because how I perceive things, a pitch is a pitch, okay? And when I put a label on that pitch, that's when it becomes a ball or a strike. In our life, an event is an event. When we put a label on that event, that's how we know how we're going to deal with it, how habitually we're going to deal with it. I hope that analogy kind of makes sense for you. I look forward to hearing some comments on it and building conversation on it. All right, next topic. Regret. Is regret a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it really a thing at all? I had a great conversation with Brent Fitzgerald, the owner of Fluid Jiu-Jitsu, the other day on the topic of regret. I constantly, because of the way that I perceive things, I constantly think, well, there is no such thing as regret. Well, there is, and a lot of people feel that way. I look at things through a certain frame. I look at things, okay, well, an event happens, kind of like the umpire analogy. Something happens, and that something then I associate with bad or good, and I have habitual ways of dealing with that something. Well, with regret, it is a thing, and the definition of regret is a thing. So let's kind of tackle that. You can have regret that you didn't do something and still have it be good. It doesn't necessarily have to be bad. Conversely, I always looked at regret as a bad thing. And that's just the label that I put on it. That's just the frame that I've looked at regret at. So regret, obviously these videos are short and we could talk longer about it, but regret is something that is real, that we all feel, okay? But it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing like I was always thinking about it. it can be a good thing as well. I'd love to hear your opinion on that. All right. Doing good better, not getting caught up in what is right and listening to those who you are helping. A lot of times, and I've dealt with this on clients that want to do good with people, they think that there is only one way of doing good, or it's their way of doing good, and they don't actively listen, and I can be guilty of this too. They don't actively listen to what that demographic is saying. So if you're looking to do some good in the community, let's say, well, when you get into it, when you start to take the action, when you start to take that first step, really listen to what's going on in that community. Because the idea that you had, perhaps, is not going to be a successful idea because you just didn't know that information. And if you keep getting stuck in what you think is best and you want to do what you think is best, you're not going to impact the people like you really want to. So often, challenge yourself. Are you really listening to the people that you want to help? This is a good topic for people that are in leadership positions as well. All right, next topic. Judgment. So I'm going to do a few topics, or I'm going to do a few conversations on judgment because I think that this is a topic that we don't talk about enough. So the idea that we are constantly making judgments of events, of people, of ourselves, and these judgments shape the way that we look at the world. Our habitual way of dealing with judgments are the framework in which we live. Okay, so I hope that was clear. So now let's go into certainty in judgments. So you make a judgment on a situation, and that situation, for a lot of us, that judgment becomes the certainty. It's 100%. This is what happened, without taking into account that there's other ways of looking at something. Wherever you're sitting right now, I would like you to look at, really take in the frame that you're looking at. So I'm looking at a wall with windows as an example, okay? Well, if you were looking the opposite direction of me, you're viewing something completely different. As the viewer of this video, you're viewing a TV screen as an example. So we're in the same room. The same stuff can happen in this room, but the judgment, the perspective can be completely different. And having a completely different perspective can alter how you think the situation went down. Well, this becomes important in a lot of different areas. If you are certain that your judgment is correct, then you are also going to be certain that somebody else's judgment is incorrect, when, honestly, both judgments could be correct. All right, last piece, and I'm sorry for the gaps. I break these down into littler videos. So if you're watching the whole thing, that's why there's kind of little gaps, because I'll probably end up chopping it there. All right, last piece. Hi, could I get 5 more minutes?
Okay, it's okay.
Thank you.
Sorry.
That's okay. All right. The last piece is that I want to talk about today. Judgments we can talk about for a long time. Unhealthy for relationships. How can your judgments be unhealthy for relationships? Well, there's a lot of different variables in that, right? So you can have a judgment that your significant other is acting a certain way. You could look at it from your own perspective, or you can look at it from both perspectives, right? If you're, going back to kind of certainty, if your judgment is always going to be right, you're always going to have problems, okay? How I would suggest to view things and how I would suggest to judge things is try to think about it as a 360-degree sphere. It's not, and it's a moving sphere. It's not just a static thing that's happening. Anything that you're judging there is no right or wrong way. It's a moving entity that's just that you can take different views, different snapshots, and that's going to give you different inputs. And those different inputs in a relationship can mean constant fighting or constant understanding of the other person. So I challenge you to really think about how you judge things and how those judgments turn into handling of situations and how you have different habits of handling those situations, especially in relationships. Thank you for joining me, and I think this video is probably going to be 8 to 10 minutes, and I really do appreciate your time. If there's any topics that you'd ever want, just message me at joshua@myodyssey.com, and I look forward to talking with you guys. Thank you.